These days, it's easy to criticize the church for being rather vitriolic, for taking up positions where they make monsters out of others, especially those outside of the church, outside of this boundary of a shared confession of faith. The church will make monsters out of others and attack anybody that they deem immoral or sinful or unethical, unsavory to their beliefs. It creates a lot of upheaval in the world, a lack of peace in the lives of those being attacked, a lack of peace in the lives of those Christians. Those non-believers look in and they say how unkind, how unloving, how unforgiving of the church. And they're right. They're totally right. So what we're seeing is, I think, a misrepresentation of the kind of conflict that Christ is after in believers. I think the devil's kingdom, or the world without Christ in it, is one of superficiality, one of skin-deep relationships, one of perfume and one of makeup and augmentation and relationships that only go so far, second wives and second lives, a world where once we're met with relational challenges, we quit, we walk away, we make it easy to end the challenges that we face. I think the kingdom of Christ calls us to something very different. I think the kingdom of Christ calls us to exceedingly challenging relational conversations, to confront long-term relationships in a way that is done with love, but is done with some level of authenticity that allows us to go deep into the roots and heart of who people are, where real healing can take place. We've got somebody who's asking Jesus, like, how many times am I supposed to forgive? Like, there's got to be some limit, right? 7 times? And Jesus said, no, 70 times 7 times. This number that's sort of, if you want to be literal about it and you're sort of counting, the point is that you're never really going to reach the end of this process of asking for forgiveness or for forgiving. It's an unthinkable number. That's how we're supposed to be in relationship with each other, to this sort of annoying point of endless forgiveness. I make the same demands of my kids all the time. I see them play board games together, and it's just like this constant level of fist fighting, and then a constant level of insisting that somebody apologize or somebody forgive, and it's this never-ending process. And there's never once been this thought where it's like, this is too much. This is the last time I'm gonna demand that this person apologize or ask for forgiveness or forgive. The thought, it's unthinkable to think that I wouldn't insist that these kids in relationship with each other, these brothers, find a way to find forgiveness and healing. And as a father, I mean, you really get a perspective of that sort of heavenly view of forgiveness in relationship. Dr. Shirley Glass is a psychiatrist. She has a book called Not Just Friends. And she points to the most difficult aspects of an affair and the fact that the recovery has to take place where the betrayer has to also be the healer. And this very upside down requirement is the same kind of requirement that heaven insists upon in our relationships if we're to go deep, that the betrayer must become the healer. She goes on to say, first you get numb, then you bleed. This is the beginning of the healing process for one who's been betrayed. I mean, that's a really graphic way of putting a loving, healing relationship, but first you get numb and then you bleed. It just is startlingly similar. This expert on healing relationships where there's betrayal is taking place, that there's this graphic language. We see the same thing in Scripture. We see, the night before Christ is crucified, he's captured, he's being interrogated, he's speechless, he's rather numb to this situation, preparing for what's to come, knowing what's next. He's accused of blasphemy, of making claims of being God, and so he's crucified for this. He's taken up to Golgotha and brutally beaten, thorns, spears, cross, nails in wrists and hands. And it's through this process that we're told that real life and real healing begins. And we see in Revelation this image that John has. In Revelation chapter 5, it says, "And I looked and beheld, in the midst of the throne and the 4 living creatures and in the midst of the elders stood a lamb as though it had been slain." And what he's watching is this eternal picture of, as if freshly crucified, Christ standing before the throne, ready to be the living act of grace and forgiveness in the lives of all who believe in him. That's the picture of heaven. It's not one filled with only, clouds and white robes and harps. It's one that remembers the brutality of what love really looks like, where there's this eternal picture of one who looks as though he had just been slain and sacrificed for everybody, standing before the throne of God, ready to be an advocate for any who believe. This fresh blood is for you the moment that you need it, when you pass, the moment that I will need it when I pass. It's going to be there waiting for us, this brutal picture of love. That is what the kingdom of heaven calls us to. And that kind of brutal love is not something that makes monsters of others, but that makes demands of us to love differently. And if people outside of the church saw that kind of self-sacrificing love, I think so many more people would be drawn to church, to share in a body of believers, than the one that they see today, where it's always on the attack because it's so much easier to make a monster out of others than of the depravity in ourselves, the lack in our own souls.